would like to welcome my guest, Anna Marti, with us. And Anna has a great story and working with older individuals. And I'm just so excited to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
Oh, absolutely. There are two questions I ask the guest because we're working. I am a profession working with aging individuals. And so I always ask, what generation are you associated with?
Well, that's kind of cultural. I would say other people might think I'm part of the boomers. I was born in 1950.
Yeah. Well, what I find is the boomers is such a large generation of years in that generation that a lot of us feel like that maybe we don't fit into that generation. And I consider myself, I'm a boomer as well, but I consider myself to really be more on the Z side than the boomer side because my philosophies and my outlooks are so different from people in the older side of the boomers. So do you feel that way as well?
Well, you'll find out more about me, but I kind of hesitate to identify with any kind of labeling, whether it's generational, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it's gender, whether it's relationship style, because when I communicate like I'm this or I'm that, depending on what your background is, you hold me there.
Yeah.
So we get held by labels. So I personally don't identify with that at all.
Okay. Well, that's really a great, and I need to be more open about that. My very first guest, Jay Bloom, has the same philosophy as you.
I remember listening to that.
Yeah. And I went, that is really kind of cool. So the labeling of these things tend to put people in different categories that are perceived in certain ways. Mm-hmm. And so I really appreciate you clarifying for that. I think I'm going to change my question.
Okay, that'd be great.
On this one to do that one.
Uh-huh.
As we're aging, do you have a philosophy on aging or what?
Gary, I don't think about it. We start aging from the minute we're born.
Absolutely.
And, absolutely. I've never, I was looking at your questions. You sent some questions to me and I was perusing them and it's like, I kind of did a sound check with a friend of mine before we got on. And I asked her the questions and, she said, you don't have a philosophy. From the background that I work from and that I have, it's really about being in this kind of organic responsiveness with reality. And again, kind of philosophy. I mean, look what's happening in the world.
Right.
Philosophy is often tied to belief.
Right.
And beliefs can be very encrusted. And there's a lot of suffering in the world right now.
Yeah, there is.
With people very tenaciously holding on to their philosophy or their beliefs. So I'd rather be in this kind of more fresh and new conversation.
And I think you're right, and I would agree, and probably need to change my own
There's another
type
question.
of views for that to change. Yes, absolutely, Anna. One of the things that I think in working with the older individuals, they tend to want to know black and white things like what generation you're in, what all this is. And so that's going to be different for me, but one that I think much needed for me is to change that dialogue and say, not even ask the question.
Yeah. So, I mean, it opens it up. It opens up to a different kind of curiosity and different kinds of listening and questions, which is, I think basically what I do when I work with people is I want to open up their view. I want to open up their beliefs. And people come to me on a really broad continuum of objective and often are fixated on like some problem. It's like, fix this. And they don't consider that any particular issue that I feel is a problem, it's not compartmentalized from the rest of my life. And we would like it to be. It's like, if I just fix this one thing, everything's going to be okay. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so we've all had personal journeys. And so, how has your personal journey led to your work, led to your uh, profession? How has that happened?
Well, yeah, being that I've been in a body for a good 72 years, it's been there's been a lot. But
Exactly.
I'm a first generation American. My parents were German Jews. They came over after the First World War, and they were quite old when they had me. They were in their 40s, and just growing up, I was born in the Midwest, and so, but my family actually was like living in Germany in the 30s. I mean, that's how it felt. So I really felt like a stranger in a strange land in
Right.
Indianapolis. I had a brother who was 18 years older, so I didn't have a sibling to kind of usher me through high school. So yeah, it shaped me, and I think it shaped me. I haven't really thought about this, um, because I felt so not fitting. So I think what I learned how to do is not really care very much what other people thought. And I don't know if you've talked to other therapists or coaches or counselors, but one of the big platforms that's popular right now is attachment styles. I don't know if you've heard about
I
that at
have
all.
not. Yeah, no.
Different conversation, different. But it's very big in the counseling realm, and it maintains that when we're small, um, we're kind of pulled between these two longings. We need safety and comfort and security in order to survive as a little baby, but we also want agency and autonomy. And so, like, kind of the first time that your mother like kind of pushes like this little bowl of something that you don't want and you push it away, no. And depending on like, some people get hit, some people, so we learn early on, if I exert myself different than what those people taking care of me, bad things happen.
Right.
And so there's, some people withdraw, some people, compromise themselves. All that to say, I really lucked out with the parent card. I had really good loving parents. And so that's called a secure attachment. So so that shaped me. The other piece in relationship to my work is my parents never imagined that they would need to tell their daughter about sex. Remember, we got these old German people, because she would find out when she got married. Right. Yeah. So this is kind of a generational thing. It happened to be, the 60s in Indianapolis, sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Absolutely.
And it was not Germany in the 30s. Consequently, I got pregnant in 1966, and I had no idea how that happened.
Yeah.
And that still happens today.
Exactly.
So that was that was when the veil kind of splits, when you realize my parents don't have all the answers and they don't know how to take. So again, there was a sense of I'm gonna begin to take responsibility for this part of my expression.
Right. Well, I have the similar background, but mine is more based on the conservative religion background, where they don't talk about sex at all.
Right.
And and everything is taboo with regard to that. So growing up in that environment, I'm very similar with that. I had no clue. And then I did not have an older sibling or anybody else to kind of lead me through it. But people tend to think that these backgrounds and these discussions would happen more today, and you've got the internet, but it doesn't.
It happens in a different way. Most kids now learn about some kind of sexuality from their phones by the time they're like 10.
Yeah.
And, it really, anybody that's listening to this, grandmas, parents, you want to make sure that those little people have correct information.
Right.
You're not going to pornography, which I don't have a problem with from a social and political point of view, but pornography gives us this totally unrealistic expectations of the erotic experience.
Absolutely.
They're going to see it. So you want to help guide them to what satisfying sex looks like. And they're not getting that from anywhere. And we're living in such a conservative climate right now that, the schools don't have their hands tied as far as being able to do the part that the parents won't do.
Exactly. And I think that that's unfortunate and really not serving the younger population by allowing them to do that. Even back in the Texas, Oklahoma area where I grew up in, there are still individuals there that have that conservative view of not talking about sex. And this is today. So it's kind of
they're in Portland too, Gary.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
They're in Portland
to do that one.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
So things shape our lives and we move forward with them. But you have probably something I wished I had known about back in my time. It would have certainly helped me out. But you are a intimacy coach, educator, and a mentor. And so talk to me a little bit about what that entails and what that means.
Well, I'm a counselor of sorts. I'm not licensed. I came to this, like what shaped me. Okay, I got pregnant in 1966. I had an illegal abortion in 1966. I escaped the kind of religious guilt that you got to carry with you. There's actually Talmudic text that says you will have to answer to God to all the things that came before you that you did not take pleasure in.
You're right.
So I have that in my lineage, but I've always been comfortable being in a body, and that's not everybody. I mean, I've danced and I've taught fitness and even though I was unskilled for so much of my life, I thought sexuality and eroticism, it was fun. And then I've been married 3 times. I make a great wife, by the way. Ask any of them. I love everyone I've ever been with.
Congratulations.
And this is, I've talked about this in interviews before, but my 3rd former husband had a lot of sexual trauma through the Catholic Church, through other kinds of trauma. And so we were deeply connected, but as far as our erotic lives, we were on very opposite sides. So initially, I began to explore this material because I wanted to bring some kind of healing and resonance into my marriage. So for many years, that's what I did. And he was willing to go to therapists and have me take him to workshops. And I became aware, and some of the workshops I did come under the umbrella of Neo-Tantra. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before.
Yes.
So Neo-Tantra is an appropriation of some practices from Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, human needs psychology, oriented toward more consciousness in erotic expression, which is not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
I love that approach. And I come from I'm GLBTQ community. And so when I came out back in the early 80s or mid 80s, I left all the guilt of the Southern Baptist Church behind, which was really good for me.
All of it?
I did it, but I was going, oh my gosh, no, this just doesn't match up with who I am today. But we also had a little revolution pre-AIDS in that community as well about how we need to change our views with regard to sex and partners and relationships. So that is just amazing that you were able to reach that very similar philosophy as well.
And in some ways, I don't know. I was going to say in some ways it might have been easier, a little bit easier for me, kind of appearing on the heteronormative scale, and I want to say congratulations to you, because that's been a long, hard road.
Yes.
And you still have privilege, because you're a white guy.
Exactly.
You're a heteronormative passing guy.
Yeah. And I talked to some of my friends of color, especially. And so if we're in cars together, it's amazing to me the difference sometimes of how you get viewed if you're with to do that one. And I have cousins that are individuals of color as well. And so when we're with them, their whole perspective's a little different in how they look at things and what they have to be aware of. But you're absolutely correct about having the white male persona helps in today's society.
I was listening today. For those of you that see this sometime in the future, the verdict that came out that wasn't the death penalty for the shooter, and they were interviewing a professor at Brooklyn Law School, and she was saying how people still, when they're just faced with different kinds of facial structures, they will vote for death penalty just based on that same exact crimes. So that there's a long way to go there.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a long way to go.
Absolutely.
We're so
diversity and inclusion. Absolutely.
But not really.
True. So this idea that you sprang forth about how you needed to help your ex heal through the sexual trauma, is that what that was with him?
Yeah, what I found. Trauma? Yeah, what I found is, I don't believe we can heal anybody. People do the work themselves. I just wanted to. I wanted to have a marriage that was more a partnership that was, less traumatized, and so that opened a door for me, and I became fascinated with how we express and connect in that way. I think of philosophy back to something I said just the other day, and it just kind of came out of my mouth spontaneously, is I really love the world.
Yeah.
I love the world. And so, loving the world in a intimate, in a physical way, I just find it endlessly fascinating. And so I don't have a conventional academic background, but I've done a lot of training through different professional organizations that are more clinical. And then also, like I said, I started in the Neo-Tantra world, and that led me to, I have a traditional tantric teacher, which is just a spiritual technology that we may or may not have time to talk about. But
so what is that actually?
Traditional tantra?
No, the spiritual aspect of it.
Yeah, so that's traditional tantra. It's a spiritual technology that involves meditation, specifically working with a teacher. That commitment to study myself, but also to use my body as a vehicle for knowing who I am, because the body has great wisdom, and any kind of meditation practice, and that's all it is practice. If you sit quietly with yourself over years, what becomes apparent is all the noise, all the narratives of, who you think you are, who I think I am. And you begin to have less attachment to that. So as we started our call, so I can be more in this kind of organic responsiveness with you, so hopefully I can let go of like, oh, here's this white guy I've never seen before, who is he?
Exactly.
And how do I define you just by that? So
exactly.
I want to feel you. I want to feel you.
Well, actually, I have learned very on that I don't really judge or define folks when I meet them or see them. So that's something I've learned over the years to do that, because I work with a lot of different folks, and I found a long time ago you just can't do that because you don't know who they are or what they're coming from and those type of things. And doing it. So
it's wonderful to be surprised, isn't it?
It is. It's wonderful to be surprised, and it's wonderful to just be an observer. And I'm going, well, that's kind of, I work some with families with conflicts, primarily around the financial arena, but it's just amazing to me. I'm just sitting there going, I'm glad I don't have a side here, because this is way too interesting to see how they're interacting about this issue, but to do that. So the intimacy coach, you do the tantra one. What else is involved in that intimacy coach portion
Well, most people come
practice?
to me,
Mm-hmm.
like on a Google search. Well, I'm also on Psychology Today. So
Yeah.
um, most people come kind of initially, maybe they have a relational issue or a sexual issue,
Mm.
and they're interested in something that's a little broader than conventional
Right.
therapy. And like I said, the body has great wisdom. What we know from psychoanalysis is, you can talk about something until you've got a foot in the grave, and you're going to be giving somebody a lot of money. And not to diminish anybody that's a psychoanalyst, but I feel like if someone isn't closer to feeling more relaxed with how they're showing up in the world, like in a year, one of us is doing something wrong.
Exactly.
And I want to refer them to some. I know I'm not the right fit for everybody.
Right. So when I come to see you, do you help me define what my issues might be if I just don't know what they are, or if the issue that I'm having isn't truly the issue? Do you kind of work with those individuals to define that?
Well, the short answer is, anybody that comes to see me, they'll like say it's you right now. I don't know you. I don't know what you should do with your life, but I have great confidence in your capacity to access your own wisdom.
Okay.
And that's probably my primary job, to create a climate, to ask questions, to help you get quiet enough so that you can listen.
Right.
Now, we can listen. Yeah, it's so interesting because have you ever heard of Landmark Forum? It was big.
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So a friend of mine was doing it, and I was on this. I'm curious about everything, Gary.
Yeah.
And I was on one of their calls, which is like a lot of marketing, but they ask you to define something that's an obstacle. And what I realized for me is, I say I want clarity, but if I have clarity, there is a responsibility to take some action. And if I can just say that I don't know, I'm not clear, then I can avoid that. So I think a lot of people are in that. If I really identify what that obstacle it is, and then there comes like, okay, don't want to do anything about it.
Yeah.
You've probably had that experience when you feel like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great philosophy, and one really when I haven't thought about that. So thank you for enlightening me on that one. That if we identify it, we have to take action.
Well, we don't have to,
but if you want to improve yourself and do what you need to do for your own personal well-being, then probably you do need to take some action on that.
Well, and the other piece of that, and I'm in a few professional groups, and I have often heard my colleagues get kind of frustrated about they've been working with somebody, and they don't do the homework, or they don't seem to have moved in the direction that they say they want to do. And the other part of that, Gary, is some people just, to be able to be in a safe place where they can express themselves, that's worth the price of admission.
That is.
And there's great
absolutely.
comfort in that. And I have a number of clients that are bisexual, and they're in heteronormative relationships that they don't believe they can come out in. But just being able to be in a room to kind of talk freely about it, it's a space where that tension of hiding can be released.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the interesting things that I experience is that I tend to accept people where they are. So I don't try to project things. And that's the reason why I've been pretty successful in what I'm doing, is because I just don't project, well, this needs to happen, that needs to happen. It'll happen at that person's own time and doing that. And sometimes it's not going to happen at all.
Right.
So that's really, really a great philosophy. The other thing, you're an educator. So how do you, I guess the question is, you've got great enlightened views, and certainly you've helped me twice or three times today. So how do you educate, and what do you educate?
I love that question. like, I think we both are examples of being absent on that day of school where they handed out the textbook for the successful erotic life.
Mm-hmm.
We were all absent on that day of school.
Yeah.
And it's a combination of, kind of basic information
Mm-hmm.
of understanding, certainly if we're talking sexually about human sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
um, just information. But more than that, because information is really,
Mm-hmm.
we're overloaded with information.
Sure.
And you can't see, I'm in my office with a screen, but I have like lots of books on sex and relationship. I have more upstairs. There is an endless number of websites and essays and workshops in Maui. And if the information is so readily available, how come we're struggling? What I've found, Gary, is we have a diminished capacity for discomfort.
Right.
We have a diminished capacity to be able to speak, listen, and experience what is awkward, uncomfortable, sometimes super scary, while cultivating a felt sense of open-hearted connection.
Wow.
Okay, so I'll give you a little example. So really imagine that we were going out, right?
Uh-huh.
And, we've gone out for a while. And when we're getting to know each other, kind of what we're doing right now, this is who I am. This is what I like. You show me who you are. We don't have a lot of investment in this relationship. But if that investment continues to grow, I become hypersensitive. If I bring up this subject, I notice you get uncomfortable. If I initiate a particular kind of touch, you withdraw. And so I tell myself, well, I love you, Gary. I don't want you to be uncomfortable, so I don't initiate those kinds of behaviors, or I avoid those subjects. And I tell myself, it's because of you, but it's not you, it's me. If I really showed you who I was and what I wanted and how I felt, you won't love me. And that is the most significant factor, that we cannot implement all this material that is so readily available. Because we, and I come at it physically, so it's not cognitively. Right. So do you have a partner right now?
I do.
Okay. How long have you been together?
40 years.
40 years.
Yes.
Okay. So I bet, and I'm going to put you on the spot, but I want you to think of something that you'd really like to talk to your partner about. You've been thinking about it for a long time. Just think about it. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you think about having this conversation with your partner, what do you notice in your body?
Well, I noticed that probably it will be uncomfortable to have that discussion with them.
Where? But I want you to notice it in real time right now.
Oh, okay.
Where do you feel it?
A little hesitant, I think.
Hesitant is a brain word. I want you to come in.
Ooh.
Yeah. How's your breathing? How's your throat feel?
It's tightening a little.
Okay.
My stomach is kind of going in little butterflies and that. Yeah.
Okay. So that's what we'll work with. So if you went to your partner and said, boy, I feel really hesitant to talk to you about this. Mm-hmm. He might say, Gary, we've been together 40 years. You don't have to be hesitant about anything, might say that. And so now we got to talk about that, not the thing that you want to talk about, right?
Right.
So, but he cannot refute. If you came and said, boy, I notice my stomach's a little tight. Do you have some time to talk right now? There's kind of an immediate felt sense of empathy.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I want to help people build that capacity, just like if you went to the gym and you'd be working for endurance or strength. I want people to feel more courageous around having those uncomfortable conversations. And I do role play with them, just kind of like we just did right now, except
absolutely we
just started it. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on being able to do that and help me through my little issue here. Appreciate
we got to spend more time together before we ever.
Absolutely. And so you're also a mentor, and tell me a little bit about your role as a mentor and how that unfolds when you work with individuals.
I haven't done as much of that lately. I actually just got a call from a young woman a couple of days ago. I don't go after that. Some people, hear about what I do and who I am. And so, um, in some ways, I do a similar thing that I do with my clients is I want to connect them with resources.
Sure.
So I've mentored a lot of people that have kind of different strengths. I remember one woman who was very clear she just wanted to work with women, so I connect her with resources in doing that. I mentored some person that was very involved in the kink community and BDSM. I worked with, so I want to, and another dear colleague of mine, she started working personally, but her love is creating communities.
Right.
And she created a platform called Sex Positive World.
Wow.
And Sex Positive Portland. So, that had meetup groups, and, because for so many people, you have shame, to talk about this very integral part of our life that's so connected to our sense of self.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The mentor role is professional mentoring, correct?
Right.
Okay. I had kind of, I'm glad you clarified that, because I was going, how are you mentoring your clients? And so this makes sense now. So thank you.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed is we work a lot with developmentally disabled individuals. We work with people with traumatic brain injuries, but the developmentally disabled community really does. Parents and people don't talk about sex with those individuals at all.
Starting to change. It's starting to change. But and there's, and I'm sure you've noticed it, there's a real sense of protection,
right,
and overprotection, and people with developmental disabilities often are what's the word I'm thinking of there? There is an E word, exploited.
Yes, absolutely.
Exploited. So that kind of care and protection seems relevant. And interesting that you should say that, because the same thing happens with older adults.
You're absolutely correct.
For many older adults, we don't stop being sexual, but so often in assisted living, staged living facilities, the caregivers are younger. They have their own shame about, like, thinking that people that are grandparents' age are having sex or want to have sex. So that's an ongoing issue as far as educating care facilities and create. And I actually have a lot of books on sex and aging, but oftentimes it's the children. So maybe some people meet in a care facility, and one of their parents is the parent that's in there is widowed, and they don't want anybody else. So we're a mess. We're so messy, Gary. We're just so messy. Human beings are messy.
You're absolutely correct. The developmentally disabled one, we had, I just attended a conference recently, and we were talking about how do you teach masturbation to younger developmentally disabled individuals. And there is no films that you can be shown in the US. We have to order Canadian films.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a number of colleagues that teach masturbation.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they've worked with that audience. And are you familiar with the Body Electric School?
I am, absolutely.
Of course you are. You better be. for your listeners, it's
exactly. And I think that teaching those individuals would be extremely beneficial. One example was given was the young man was aggressive and all this other stuff, and they thought, why all of a sudden? And then they went in and showed the video and taught them how to masturbate. And it's amazing how all those aggressive behaviors went away once they felt like that they were able to express their sexuality. But you're absolutely correct in that older individuals, as well as in the developmentally disabled community, people tend to have family members very negative types of responses and emotions when the older individual maybe wants another relationship with doing that. And we've struggled with that a lot because we serve as guardian of the person and financial on those. And so we have to say in the protocol, but again, like you said, if they're older, people just think you don't have sex. So,
or they just don't want to think about it. You know, they just want to consider that you might be sexual, even when you were younger, if it's a relative. Yeah,
exactly. But it's an interesting dynamics and something we've certainly got to overcome. I don't know when, but we'll education such as yourself will certainly benefit that. Do you talk when you educate and talk about these things? Do you talk about? I was mentioning to a friend of mine that I was going to have you as a guest, and they said, how does STDs work in the older community? Do you talk about that, or because nobody
we call them STIs now?
STIs,
sexually transmitted infections.
Infections. Okay.
Yeah, STIs.
Gosh, Anna, I am learning so much from you today on these things. Thank you. Do you talk about that at all when you educate groups?
Yeah, I mean, kind of depending if I'm, often working with an older adult. In fact, a colleague and I are doing an in-person event next week at the Lake Oswego Community Center for older adults on dating. And for those of us in our particular generation, we didn't really, I mean, I think that the gay population had more of those conversations, but we didn't have those conversations so much. And so older adults are not comfortable having those conversations. They weren't comfortable 45 years ago, and they're not comfortable today. And actually STIs have been increasing among older adults because they don't have those conversations. But I was at a professional training, and they did a great demonstration about this. And so, let's say we were sitting next to each other, and they told you to hold my hand. What would you do?
Hold your hand.
You'd hold my hand.
Yes.
Do you know I washed my hands?
I grew up on a ranch.
Why didn't you ask me if I washed my hands?
Probably because, like I said, I grew up on a ranch, and so there's nothing, that I had been exposed to. Is probably the reason on that. But you're right. Why don't you ask those questions?
Because I mean, what are some of the answers? Well, I trusted you. Or I just assumed, that your hands were clean, or that would feel awkward. Those are all the same reasons that we don't ask about STIs.
Yeah.
I trusted you. You would think I was rude if I asked. Yeah.
Well, great example of why we don't do that. And truly, even younger generations, I when I talk to them about sexual experiences and are you taking cautions or precautions against all this stuff, they're almost the same as the older adults. They don't want to ask about it. So you have to really put it into their psyche that this is important. Yeah.
God, I'm trying to think of the acronym right now. A colleague of mine, she's a really brilliant OBGYN out of Salem, and she has a TEDx talk that she did.
Oh, yeah.
And it's an acronym, and I can't believe I can't think of it right now. I know one way to spell it is RATS, RATS. God, what is it? I'll find it before we finish. But she initially did it for her 16-year-old son, but it's an acronym. And so if we're going to start going out, well, I want to find out what your relationship status is. That's the R. Well, you're in a committed relationship. Well, I'm looking for a committed relationship. If we don't have that, we don't need to do anything else. But oftentimes we don't have that conversation. The A is for, what are the sexual behaviors that you avoid, that you really don't want to do? The things that you don't want to do are the things I really like doing. I don't want to get my clothes off with you. And let's see, there's one for the STI screen and your safe sex practices. And isn't that so funny? Let's see. And all right. I should have prepared better. But
Listen, I
find
can
it.
prepare all I want to. Sometimes it's just,
It's gone.
it's gone,
It's gone. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
there's the things that you want to avoid and the things that you really like. And so
Right.
being able to talk about this, but also your STI status and also your safe sex practices. And
Right.
ideally, you want to learn how to have those comfortably before you take your clothes off with someone.
Exactly. And I really appreciate that you're able to bring that awareness to individuals. That's absolutely great. One of the things is that how would I nurture a vibrant erotic connection? How do I nurture that as myself?
Hmm. Oh, um, start paying attention to um, what you're enjoying.
Okay.
You know, how do you eat a meal? Are you, can you pause for a minute and, appreciate the color and the smells and the taste? Food is like so sensual. People love going out to eat with me because I really enjoy eating. Uh, but I hope I don't offend anyone here, but you know, if you go out with someone and there's like they don't eat any, they have all these restrictions and they have a problem with food. I don't know if I want to get naked with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes there's a connection. Um,
Yeah.
so being in nature, spending time in nature is how to cultivate that erotic relation.
Does meditation help with that as well?
It can.
Okay.
There's all kinds of meditations, and there are all kinds of meditation practices that you know do have kind of a body negative
Mm-hmm.
aspect. So
Mm-hmm.
your question was, how do I cultivate more of an erotic connection with myself? So meditations that involve a lot of traditional tantric meditations
Mm-hmm.
involve a lot of stuff. There's incense and there's flowers. And so, you know, they are things that, activate the senses.
Sure.
Being in nature. When you get dressed in the morning, what do you choose? Do you choose something that feels good against your skin? Or do you even notice? Do you like to dance? Dancing is a great way.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Wow.
just to get started. Yeah, just a
Yeah.
few
Well, I
things.
was going to say, that's that again. I've been enlightened on that, and won't say that. I hate saying that again and again, but I have been. It is not only it's you expanded the definition of what I would have thought that would have been erotic.
Mm-hmm.
You expanded it to include the senses that you have and enjoying the moment where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a key to that being able to do that. So thank you for expanding that definition, helping me out with that.
And also as a penis owner,
Yes.
from Texas.
Yes.
you know, you
Yeah.
know, we're still doing this to penis owners, which is that doesn't hurt. Be a big boy. You are discouraged from sensing yourself. You are
Exactly.
rewarded for what you express from here up. And even in athletics,
Yeah.
the body is seen as luggage to get you, And so when I work with men, regardless of their orientation, oftentimes they've um, internalized this very limited um, concept, this little view of their sexuality, which it like has to do with this like one piece of their body that doesn't connect to all the other parts.
Right.
And to have a really vibrant erotic connection is opening that up. That part of your body, your penis is not separated from the rest of you. And those
Right.
pleasurable sensations can stream through your whole body. And that's something that you can share with a partner.
Yeah.
So it becomes very rich.
It does become very rich and absolutely. Um, I noticed that, and this just intrigued me beyond belief, that you do a death cafe.
Well, that the
What is that?
okay, so death cafes were started by a man and his mother in London
Mm-hmm.
to open the conversation on death and dying.
Okay.
And at one point, Portland, not surprising, had the most significant number of active death cafes in the world. When the pandemic hit, and in Portland, they tried to pivot to an online platform. The person in Portland that was facilitating that was unable to continue it. So I know you had that question, and I was going to see what was happening in Portland. But what they look like is a library, a restaurant, a bar, a coffee shop will donate their space for several hours. And people come just because they want to talk, they want to have a place to talk about death and dying. And as a facilitator, you have one rule. You want to keep a conversation going. You want to make sure nobody's trying to impose their beliefs on anybody else, or they're not trying to sell anything.
Right.
But, there are people that are grieving. There are people that might have a prognosis. There are people that have lost someone. There are people that just want to talk about death. And it's interesting because when I first came to Death Cafe, and I felt like, this is home. I mean, I even did like 2 parts of a death doula training, like death midwife. And I realized there's a connection between sex and death.
Yeah.
And they're both portals of transformation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is yeah, that's great that you are able to make that a distinction for us. Transformation. That's great.
Yeah.
So, death and dying has been something I've been around since my childhood. And I deal a lot with surviving children where one has passed away traumatically. Because that happened in my instance. My brother was 9, I was 5, I was in the back of the truck. My dad accidentally ran over him.
Oh God, that's the worst.
And then as a result died of that. So very, very from that moment on,
huge trauma.
I've been going through that and working through that through therapy for years. But I find that those people are the ones that they have a surviving child guilt, which is the other child has become this angel of nothing, and here you are, and if you mess up, then you aren't living up to the expectations of the other child.
Yeah.
So I've worked a lot with that community, and I wish I had known about these death cafes, because I think it would have been very therapeutic and very good to talk about how those things happen, how they affect us, how grief is different for one individual versus another. So yeah, absolutely. Well, the last question I have is, what do you think is going to happen to future generations with regard to sex education and the education piece of that? Do you have any sense of where it's going to go?
How would I know?
No, I know. Yeah, really.
It was one of the questions I read to my friend. Is like,
but I think for me, it's maybe a hope that the future will have more individuals willing to look at life a little differently and experience it.
Well, you're from Texas, Gary.
Yes.
So, and we're living in Portland. I'm living in Portland. You're close by.
Yeah.
But we're in a bubble.
Yeah, we are.
We're
Absolutely
in a bubble.
correct.
And with the overturn of Roe versus Wade, and all the different news items that I've been watching, that these apps that women track their menstrual cycle on, they can be used against them and find out if they've tried to have an abortion in a state that's disallowed it. So on one hand, and this has been the case for a number of years, we have less, although it's changing. Yeah. Netflix has some really wonderful kind of sex education material. Although I just heard that, was it the Discovery Channel bought HBO, and HBO initially had, some of the edgier shows, The Sopranos, and without the kinds of editing and stringent regulations that network television did. But the plan that Discovery has for HBO now is they're going to make it more family friendly and and reality-based shows. So
Yeah.
I actually from a tantric orientation, you think about things in a larger worldview. Right now, not just in the United States, but all over, Hungary and South America, and there's so many fascist governments kind of coming into power, and that's the natural expression of reality. Things like expand and contract and expand and contract.
Right.
How about you? How do you feel?
Well, I think the future is going to be, like I said, hopeful in that one. I agree we're in a bubble here. And I'm a little concerned about us becoming less tolerant and less loving than we have been in the past. And I think that probably it's just a very few percentage points to change the political climate in most of these states.
Yeah.
And so I think, and I'm hopeful that the Roe versus Wade wakes people up. That decision, the marriage equality thing that's probably going to be coming through the Supreme Court has that to do that. Just the loss of a lot of individual freedoms that we've in law that has been out there and tested, like Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
And it concerns me that those 3 nominees for the Supreme Court justices were not truthful, because that's what their whole profession is based on, is the truth.
Yeah.
In making those decisions. So I'm disappointed in that realm. I think we've lost some ethics in this country. So.
It's wild, as a first generation America, and my father particularly came over after the First World War.
Yeah.
And so I was brought up with, my parents were like of the, kind of the Beaver, Leave It to Beaver 50s, where, there was this kind of sense of hope and peace and people getting along. Although I think what was really happening is the Band-Aid's been pulled off.
Right.
The marginalized, the disenfranchised have always been with us.
Right.
And now people don't want to see them in next door, which is kind of a black hole. People are so mean.
They are.
Yeah. I don't want to see them. Get rid of the camps. Yeah.
Well, and they've got, I think part of the problem here is we've lost our filters. People that used to be, they wouldn't be saying things, now are just saying it because the environment is more accepting of it. And I think that is really part of going backwards, declining point of views to do that. But
yeah. And again, so many factors involved. I have grandchildren, and when you and I went to school, I don't know how it was in Texas, but we had art and music.
Yes.
Yeah, that's gone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So gone. Being exposed to classical music, I go to the symphony. It's like, my granddaughter, who is like super smart, she hardly ever watches movies. So that that kind of appreciation of the stream of history that connects us, that's certainly diminishing to some degree.
It's diminishing a lot, actually, unfortunately. Things we're debating in books, we're debating all of these issues about, whether they're appropriate or not. So I'm hopeful that the next generation, or my generation, will become more of an advocate and get out there and march again like they did in the 60s and 70s, so that we can get some definite change coming in. Well, Anna, thank you so much for being my guest. I have truly enjoyed this, and thank you so much for your perspective, which is just has changed my viewpoints on several things. Thank you so much.
Well, it's been just super lovely to talk with you, and especially, sometimes when I do an interview like this, like I'll have like a half an hour conversation with someone, so that kind of know each other, and like, this is the first time we've met, so it was really fun to hang out with you. I hope we get to hang out again.
I hope so too. I would love that. So good.